books are written by first-gen Latinas and can be game changers because there's not a lot of books out there that specifically talk to us, right? About what we're facing, the challenges that we face. But both of your books tackle different issues.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here, Naibe. Latinafest, what an incredible event. I mean, I'm sure you guys can already feel the energy. I feel so motivated and enthusiastic to be here. So why I wrote First Gen? You know, it actually was born of having conversations like this. And I wrote about this in the book, which is I'm a Pell Grant recipient. I grew up in pipeline programs and nonprofits. And so it was always important for me to go back and especially to, speak to young people about this journey. But when I would hear bio or resume read, kind of how you just did, it felt like it left so much out of the story, right? Because all of our lives eventually get distilled into a number of bullet points in a bio where we went to school, what our job was. But we know that the real story is really in the spaces between in our resume, the spaces between those bullet points. And when I would speak to folks, especially at these moments of achievement, these graduations or award ceremonies, I would recognize a look sometimes in their eyes that was similar to how I'd feel in those events, which was proud, yes, excited, yes, also a little scared, maybe sometimes a little guilty, maybe even sometimes a little confused. And it seemed like the multidimensionality of these experiences was getting lost in translation, literally sometimes and figuratively. Where was the acknowledgement of, yes, the incredible experience of the American dream, but also the things we lose as well as gain. And so I started changing the way that I would speak when I would go to these events, and I started talking about those things. And when I did, I noticed that there were a lot of tears and nodding heads. And I said, okay, so if I'm going to be a fortunate person to write a book, because we know how few Latinas have the opportunity to write a book, and so I'm so proud to be sitting here with 3 Latina authors. If I was going to have the privilege of writing a book, well, I was going to keep it real. And I was going to talk about those things. And so that's what this book is. It's kind of an anti-memoir in a lot of ways, because it says all the things that you probably wouldn't want someone to know. But that's what I focus on, because we deserve to have our own experiences be acknowledged and validated, especially by ourselves. And this is a process, as you will see as you read along the book with me, of acknowledging for myself that the first generation experience isn't just being a first generation student, it's also all the firsts that led up to being a student, and all the firsts that continue to go on for the rest of your life, because we know that that's why I call this the first and only experience, because many times we do distill it into just being first generation American. Now that's a part of it, and as Latinas we can speak about that today. And this dynamic is an emotional experience that extends far beyond race or gender. This transcends that, because it's about what that emotional experience is of being a cycle breaker.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. And I've listened to your audiobook, and wow, it's like I was kind of living vicariously through Alejandra. You should, if you haven't read her book or purchased it in audio, do it, because I'm like, wow, this is like a telenovela, but in a good way. I mean, she was in Maxim, she worked for President Obama, she was like girlfriend with a gang member. I mean, it goes all over the place, but in a good way, because I think that's all of us. Latinas are not one-dimensional. We are multi-dimensional. We could be everything and everything. Why not? Why do we have to be put in a box? And Alejandra, your memoir, really, to me, that's what resonated. We're not one-dimensional. We can have, a boyfriend that was a gangster when we were in high school, and then be working at the White House, and then go in, back and forth, in between, and all around. ¿Por qué no, right? So I want to ask you the same question, Gigi. Why did you need to write this book?
Thank you for the question. Can everybody hear me okay? Hi, thank you so much for coming. The reason I wrote Cultura in Cash was because I went through a lot of financial hardships in my 20s, and after after just having enough of that, I said, okay, I need to self-teach myself how money works because I just can't keep being on the struggle bus for the rest of my life. So I immersed myself in money books, and all that existed at the time was mostly books written by white male authors, some white women authors like Susie Orman or Jean Chatsky. I read over 50 books. I felt that I had mastered everything. But then when it came to implementing these financial tips that I had learned from these white authors, there was a culture clash with my Latino family. These authors didn't teach me how to factor in financial support for my family. It's very common for us to have to provide a monthly allowance to family members, right? So they didn't talk about that. So even though I had read 50 books, I didn't know how to navigate that or how to set financial boundaries when I didn't have the money or the ability to support family, and how to deal with the challenges that come from setting financial boundaries with loved ones, or how to prepare to be our parents' retirement plan. All those books taught you how to focus on your budget, on your retirement plan, but nothing about family. And as Latinos, we're so family oriented, so that piece was missing. And I'm like, we need a book that addresses the unique challenges that the First Gen community has with their money journey.
And obviously when you're writing a book, you're kind of spilling your soul, a piece of your soul, right, into the writing process. And wow, both of you share things that other people may keep hidden because they don't want to know that there was financial issues, or they don't want to know that, different things, that you struggled with certain things. Sometimes we are scared to show that side of ourselves. So when you were writing your book, did either of you struggle with being completely vulnerable? And what was the most vulnerable thing that you shared in your book? So we'll start with Alejandra.
Well, it's physically activating as well as emotionally activating when you're going into sometimes your deepest traumas and some of these stories that you haven't revisited in a long time. Now, I wear an aura ring. I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's like one of these rings that tracks your heart rate and your sleep and so on. And I noticed that when I would sit and write, my heart rate would spike, right? I'd be sitting in a chair and it'd go from like 50 beats per minute to like 150, right? And I also, if I would write past 2 in the afternoon, I would have anxiety and stress, kind of based insomnia afterwards. So I had to make sure to kind of set those boundaries and write really early. So a lot of it was very activating, but to me that told me that I was on the right track, right? Because being honest is what you want to do when you write a book. Otherwise, I guess people write books for lots of reasons, but that's not why I wrote this book. I wanted to be honest and be real. Now, I think the hardest part of it was actually talking about where my own trauma intersected with my family's, especially my mom's. My mom is here today, and there she is, and my sister. Everyone's like, that's the baby from the book right there, for those who have read it. That was the baby. But when I wrote, especially, there was this one scene that people referred to as the rib scene that I won't spoil it or take a lot of time to tell the story, but it was a really dramatic time where my mom and I went through, a really traumatic moment that dissolved her previous marriage. And I wanted to read it to her before I put it in the book, before I finalized it, because I didn't want to re-traumatize her or make it be something that was a surprise. This book is not written from a blaming or pointing fingers dynamic. It has a lot of love for my family, and it tells the truth. So I read it to her, and I remember us feeling, both of us, really activated that day. I think we even got into a little bit of a bicker, because we were both just like vibrating, right? From remembering the dialogue and who said what and who did what and all of that. And to her credit, she never asked me to change anything or leave anything out, which I really appreciated. But the addendum to this story is months later, this past fall, I was speaking at the LA Public Library, and my mom came, and she was sitting right there in the middle, and I was watching her because, we always keep a track on our parents and how they're reacting to what we're saying. It's part of the hypervigilance we develop as former parentified children, right? Yes, it's a thing. I write about that in the book. So I was being my hypervigilant self and kind of keeping an eye on her. And when people came up to ask questions, some people started crying. And in fact, everyone who stood up started crying, sharing their own story. And I noticed her notice that. And the next morning she called me and she said, I just want to let you know that I get it now. I understand why you shared these things, and I understand why you shared my story too, and your story, that it's bigger than us. And so I guess that's the full circle moment, that it was hard, but that hard can be so healing, right, for everyone if you step through it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing and for being vulnerable. So Gigi, talk to us about your vulnerabilities or sharing things that some people may not want to share in your book.
Anybody here know me from TikTok or Instagram? Closer. If you know me from social media, you know I am a natural oversharer. So I actually didn't have too hard of a time being vulnerable. That's just the only way I know. But there was one part of the book that was very challenging for me to finally write. And it's funny because I didn't have the guts to do it until after my hysterectomy. So I had a hysterectomy around this time last year. I had to actually take a 2-month break from writing to recover from my surgery. And coming back from something so hard as a major abdominal surgery just made me bolder in so many ways. And that's when I had the courage to write that at the end of the book, that I do not plan to be my mom's retirement plan. And that was scary for me to admit to my reader, but I also